Exclusive contract novel from Feilu Novel Network. Remote-controlled battleship Mars exploration. You call it drone. I thought that returning to college would allow Peng Kang to choose to live a relaxed and comfortable life. But unexpectedly obtained the starlight of the Godwin star civilization inheritance system. So, a company called Star Technology was quietly established. Intelligent Array Control System, Carbon Crystal Supercapacitor Battery Photon/Quantum Supercomputer Rotating Detonation Engine, Artificial Intelligence, STARS, technology that surpasses the times has emerged one by one. When the space warships of Star Technology flew over the Kármán line, blocking the sky and the sun, the great powers collapsed. Who really is the great power? Eagle Sauce. Rabbit, your spaceship technology should be shared with all humanity to promote progress. John Bull. Rabbit, your warship belongs to the category of weapons of mass destruction. Rabbit. Who said this belongs to a warship? There's no one here, it's just a slightly larger drone. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. Inheritors of Civilization, Seeking Flowers and Tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the early morning, the young man lying in bed suddenly opened his eyes and sat up, breathing wildly. A constant cold sweat lingers on the forehead. After more than 10 seconds, the calm young man looked around and smiled bitterly. This is so. Reborn. From a psychological perspective, for someone who had experienced a car accident and was lying in the car waiting to die the moment before, being reborn is truly an incredibly wonderful thing. But Peng Kang is a bit unwilling. Because it was already difficult to buy a house in 2023, he successfully bought a new house with full payment, thanks to his savings of over 5 million yuan from several years of work and more than 20 million yuan from family support, totaling 30 million yuan. I bought the new house for over a year before notifying him of its acceptance. The reason for buying a new house is also very simple, the family is forcing us to get married. The 2-bedroom apartment that I originally lived in was completely unsuitable for marriage in the eyes of my family, so I had to hurry up and create a grandson for my parents. The post-.90s generation is already 30 years old and still unmarried, which has driven their parents crazy. As a result, he had just finished the inspection and had not lived in for a day before being reborn. To celebrate being able to move into a new house, he and his colleagues ate together to celebrate. I used to find a substitute driver to drive when I drank too much, but unexpectedly, there was still a car accident. He sat in the back of the car and watched helplessly as a car swiftly veered towards him. After experiencing immense pain for a few minutes, I once again fully realized that I have returned to my youth. Looking at the situation around him, he was very aware that he was currently in the dormitory of the University of Science and Technology during his college years. Taking advantage of the night light, Peng Kang glanced at the names of professional books on the table and shook his head with a bitter smile. In my third year, 2012, this is so special. Lying by the window of the dormitory, he began to ponder what he should do. If we follow the rhythm before rebirth, we can continue to take the postgraduate entrance examination in college and then graduate to create a robotics company. I worked hard for several years to gain some fame, it's too tiring. Is it possible to invest or play in the entertainment industry? He knows at least which movies will go viral and which stocks will rise. Why don't you call your parents tomorrow to ask for money? Thinking of this, Peng Kang felt a bit tempted. It may be difficult to open a chain supermarket at home for tens of millions, but it is still not a problem to buy stocks or wait for Bitcoin to rise slowly for 10.2 million. This way, I will have sufficient confidence after graduation, and at least for now, Bitcoin still has room for growth. But when he thought about the situations he encountered and heard about in the technology industry in his later life, he was a bit unwilling. And from the perspective of industry output value, the film industry is not big. Before the mask industry, the total scale of the domestic film industry was less than 60 billion yuan, but the domestic GDP was 10 trillion yuan, less than 1,000th. Approximately 2,000 new films are produced in China each year, with the top 5 films accounting for 20% of the box office revenue. Some of his films have box office revenues of over 2.3 billion, or even over 5 billion. The other 1,900 movies are divided into the remaining tens of billions. Based on this analysis, the seemingly hot film industry is actually flying higher than its drones and robots. And its commercial value and vision are not as good as his efforts to make drones and robots. Thinking of this, Peng Kang gave up decisively. But I'm not willing to go home and open a supermarket. After hesitating for a while, Peng Kang decided to pick up his old profession and continue working on drones and robots. Forget it, let's just stick to drones, robots, and automation. I don't believe it can still be so difficult to do it again. When I think of my past life and the situation in the industry where I was stuck in chips and industrial software, a wave of anger surged to my forehead. Having determined his thoughts, he slowly exhaled a long breath and lit a cigarette. The lonely orange light flickered in the night. Ding! It has been detected that inheriting human nature meets the conditions, and the Godwin star civilization inheritance system Starlight has officially launched. Dear heir, although our civilization has come to an end, it will be reborn in an alternative way under your leadership. Anyway, the legend of the universe will never lack our Godwin civilization, the Godwin civilization will always prosper. The sudden sound of prompts made Peng Kang nervous and excited, as he had anticipated. After all, even a special rebirth has been achieved, which proves that there must be a reason for one's rebirth. It seems that the Godwin star civilization inheritance system is the reason for its rebirth. Yeah, Godwin star civilization Yongchang, human race Yongchang, Chinese civilization Yongchang. For this civilization, Peng Kang doesn't care at all now. What can he do if he finds out? Besides, it's better not to have it anymore. It's not my turn yet. What I am more concerned about now is what I can achieve. Inheritance and opening rewards. Information and computational science, junior artificial intelligence, statistics, polymer physics, surface physics, aerodynamics, precision instruments, machinery, automation. Information begins to be transmitted. The flame of civilization will never extinguish. Inheritors, please continue to work hard, endless deep space awaits you. Chapter 2. The four heavenly kings gather again, seeking flowers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ding. The inheritance task has officially begun, Stage 1. Reputation. Stage 1 Task 1. Achieve a reputation of 10,000 inch. The next stage of the task will start after the completion of this stage's task. It was over 10 minutes before Peng Kang woke up from the shock. Feeling various advanced theories in his mind, Peng Kang trembled and lit a cigarette, taking a few firm puffs. Damn it, if you can still get your neck stuck this time, I'll just go die. Now that the technology is available, the startup funds are provided by the family, and the entrepreneurial candidates are very simple, just 4 brothers in the dormitory. The company I worked for in my previous life was started by my brothers, and we have been working together happily ever since. As pure STEM men, there are no common commercial or economic disputes between them, but rather more disputes over technical routes and solutions. Thinking of this, Peng Kang turned around and walked towards Hua Pengyun's bed. He lifted the blanket covering him and patted his face. Huazi, wake up. Wake up. In a daze, Hua Pengyun opened his eyes and saw Peng Kang's excited face in the dim starlight darkness, which startled him. Sleeping in bed, what are you doing without sleeping in the middle of the night? We're not interested in learning Zhu Ji's tricks. Peng Kang gave him a glance and said, why did you wake up in the middle of the night and know that the owner who was lifting the blanket for his roommates is now afraid? Get up, let's talk about some business. Hua Pengyun saw Peng Kang's appearance, nodded, and followed him to a place near the windowsill. He naturally lit a cigarette and said, "What's wrong? It's almost senior year, what are your plans?" Peng Kang asked seriously. Hua Pengyun frowned and said, "Didn't we agree to take the postgraduate entrance exam together? Why, you don't want to take the exam?" Peng Kang nodded and said, "I want to start a business." Hua Pengyun spat out a cigarette ring and gave him a blank glance, saying, "Big brother, don't make a fuss. With just our automation, what can we do without taking the postgraduate entrance exam and starting a business? More professional skills can only be learned after taking the postgraduate entrance examination. Undergraduate studies are too broad and not proficient at all." Peng Kang smiled slightly, shook his head calmly, and began to mention his first entrepreneurial project in his heart. Intelligent cluster array control technology and drone technology. Immediately, in the quiet campus, apart from various theories and technical solutions popping out of Peng Kang's mouth, there were only the sounds of small animals outside the window and the wind blowing through the leaves. Before Peng Kang could finish speaking, Hua Pengyun's cigarette had already fallen to the ground, and the other two roommates in bed, Meng Hui and Xiang Jun, had already stood up and stared at Peng Kang with fiery eyes. Although there are some things Peng Kang said that they don't understand, it doesn't hinder them from distinguishing the feasibility of the entire solution. Xiang Jun jumped onto the ground without even putting on his shoes and said, "Kangzi, where exactly did you learn these things?" Peng Kang shook his head with a smile and said, "My software has always been an advantage, aren't you unaware?" Meng Hui frowned and thought for a while before saying, "Are you sure you want to make a drone? As far as I know, there are already many pioneers in China. You're talking about Dajiang, it's famous in later generations, and their Dajiang L Phantom 1 will be released next year." Peng Kang smiled in his heart, but still explained, "Do you think with the technology one just mentioned, if implemented, there is a chance to make a civilian consumer-grade drone?" Upon hearing these words, Hua Pengyun tightly grasped Peng Kang's arm with both hands and said, "Are you going to be in the military?" Peng Kang shook his head confidently and said, "Not only that, but security departments such as the police can also do it. If you want to do it, be the most advanced. Besides, is there any business on this planet that makes more money than weapons?" Peng Kang, who has participated in several international exhibitions in later generations, is well aware of the consumption power of the oil giants in the Middle East. "A piece of cloth above my head, I am the richest in the world," is not just a statement, it was all smashed with Franklin. The other few people in the dormitory were surprised by Peng Kang's appetite, but they did not doubt what they had just heard. The most important question is whether it can be done or not. Xiang Jun also took out a cigarette from Hua Pengyun's desk and lit it. "Entrepreneurship is okay, money is not a problem for us, the problem is technology." Upon hearing these words, Peng Kang smiled, feeling very reassured by his life contact and understanding of his roommates. Hua Pengyun, his family started a factory in a coastal area. Meng Hui, from northern Suzhou. Xiang Jun, the second generation of demonic dismantling. The funds for several people's entrepreneurship in later generations were also collected from their families. Peng Kang used to marvel at the coincidences of the world, which brought together several wealthy families. "I have been considering this matter recently, and I have perfected this technical solution many times in my mind. If we pursue a master's degree, it will take us at least 3 years. Many domestic technologies are now in a critical period of transformation and advancement. If we cannot seize this opportunity, no one can guarantee what will happen in 3 years." Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, everyone fell silent. "And to take a step back, it's really a failure. Let's learn from it and fight again after taking the postgraduate entrance exam." The other few people glanced at each other and nodded, "It's done." Chapter 3. The Stars Born in Room 413, Seeking Fresh. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Seeing several roommates expressing their opinions, Peng Kang laughed. "Let's talk about the shares first. I'm planning to ask my family for 2 million yuan, plus the technology here. After speaking, he pointed to his own brain. Hua Pengyun rubbed his hands excitedly and said, I asked my family for 1 million yuan. Let's start with it. If we really fail, let's fight again after graduation. There are too many opportunities for the first time, and it's not easy to explain in case of failure. After all, we still need to make room for the next battle. Meng Hui and Xiang Jun also nodded and said, then let's all contribute 1 million. Peng Kang nodded and said, okay, how do we divide the shares? Xiang Jun thought for a moment and said, in the early stages, let's each use 10%. After all, your technology is too advanced and it's not suitable for us to take too much. Meng Hui and Hua Pengyun nodded. Peng Kang nodded and said, next, what is the name of the company? Now none of them spoke up, but instead began to ponder. After a while, Meng Hui looked up and said, how is the river? Peng Kang gave him a displeased glance and said, your grandfather, can't you cross the river with the Jiang? Meng Hui smiled and said, there is a big river in the south and a big river in the north, how great. Xiang Jun shook his head and said, no, it's too tacky. How about Skywalker? This name made Peng Kang's face twitch. Skywalker is the name of their company in their past life. Later, when colleagues had meetings or exhibitions, they would joke about them. Look, Skywalker Luke is here. This almost caused a few people to die in society at that time. Peng Kang looked at Hua Pengyun, who shrugged and spread out his hands. Hey, why don't you give up your names? Choose between star and star seat. Our journey is the sea of stars, and I hope this statement can be realized in our company. Although Peng Kang is confident that this matter can definitely be achieved, he still needs to be gentle now. Finally, several people chose the name. Star Technology Company, Limited. Okay, that's it now. I'll handle the Intelligent Cluster Array Control Technology, Flight Control Technology Meng Hui, Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Manufacturing Xiang Jun, and I'll give you the sketch. Huazi, can you come and handle the company registration? A few people nodded. Immediately, four shiny cigarette butts appeared on the windowsill of room 413 in the late night. The next morning at around 7 o'clock, several people woke up one after another. As if premeditated, the few of them glanced at each other, washed up, and turned their heads to leave the dormitory. Stepping out of the dormitory building, several people dispersed on the playground and started calling their families. Hello, Dad, good morning. After dialing Comrade Peng Guodong's phone number, Peng Kang warmly greeted him. How much do you want? Peng Guodong ignored Peng Kang's enthusiasm and asked the core question. Peng Kang has also become accustomed to his father's reaction, as he is always so enthusiastic when asking for money. 2 million. Is 200 enough to spend? You only need 200. Wait, 2 million. On the other end of the phone, Peng Guodong suddenly woke up and said, did you demolish the school laboratory or the dormitory? He was aware that his son often conducted experiments at school, so this time he suddenly needed so much. He instinctively believed that there was a problem with the experiment and demanded compensation. Peng Kang gave a bitter smile and said, no, we have discussed and decided to start a business in our dormitory. The other end of the phone suddenly quieted down. After a while, Peng Kang's father's voice came again. Are you all not going to graduate school? Peng Kang nodded and said, well, there has been a breakthrough in my technology recently, and after analyzing it, everyone unanimously believes that there is something wrong with it. And if it really fails, come back and continue taking the postgraduate entrance examination. That's a bit reliable. Although your father doesn't have a high level of education, he can do such a big business because he respects knowledge and knowledge. I don't care about starting a business, but I can't let go of studying. After all, your profession is not like those people in our company. Their profession has no professional barriers, and your profession has too high professional barriers, which is your true advantage. Listening to his father's chatter, Peng Kang felt particularly friendly at this moment. After starting his own business in his previous life, my father also occasionally talked about his business experience on the phone like he does today. I'll call you this morning. Do you need my help with the company's procedures? Can I ask Xiao Su to come over and help you with it? Xiao Su is his father's secretary, and he is also a man. There's no way, Comrade Peng Guodong is too afraid of himself, and Peng Kang's mother wouldn't let the female secretary species appear in her own company. Peng Kang shook his head decisively and said, "No need, let's tinker with it ourselves." Peng Guodong chuckled heartily and said, "Haha, good, ambitious. Don't worry, go tinker." After hanging up the phone, Peng Kang's mother Fan Jing asked in confusion, "Does my son want to start a business?" Peng Guodong nodded with a smile and said, "Their dormitories have decided to start their own businesses first. If they fail, they will take the postgraduate entrance examination." Fan Jing smiled contentedly and said, "Just don't give up on taking the postgraduate entrance examination. I'm afraid he won't want to continue reading." Peng Guodong picked up his phone and looked at the time, then smiled and said, "Our ancestors in the Peng family have been farmers for generations, and now that we are in a moderately prosperous society, we have some achievements. If he doesn't study, he will go back to pay respects to his ancestors. The elders will not be angry to death. Okay, then I'll get up too and transfer money to my son. I'll go in the morning. You can keep me busy." After speaking, Ms. Fan Jing began to dress up beautifully. Chapter 4. Kid, it was you who said you were going to test me back then. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, what did your family say? In the center of the playground, Hua Pengyun was the first to solve the problem and had already sat and waited on the playground. Seeing a few people walking over, Hua Pengyun spoke up and asked. "I'm fine, I'll call you this morning," Peng Kang said first. "My dad said in the afternoon that he drank too much last night and needs to catch up on his drowsiness this morning." Hua Pengyun also mentioned his situation. Meng Hui was very cheerful and said, "My dad also said in the morning." Then a few people looked at Xiang Jun. Xiang Jun's face looked a bit unpleasant. "My parents have gone abroad for tourism again, and they will have to wait for 3 days before they return home. It's okay, I haven't finished writing the software yet. Registering now is useless," Peng Kang comforted. Xiang Jun shook his head and said, "No, they lied to me before saying they wouldn't be secretly going abroad to play without me. If it weren't for me asking this time, they wouldn't be telling the truth and trying to ruin my gift." Meng Hui gave him a sympathetic glance and said, "Why don't you do a paternity test? Brother Qian will pay for it for you." "I'll go to your uncle's house," retorted Xiang Jun. Haha. In the following period of time, besides attending classes, a few people began to be frantically busy. Peng Kang personally wrote the program and gave this intelligent cluster array control technology a resounding name. Tiangong. The name is taken from the world's first comprehensive work on agriculture and handicraft production, as well as an ancient Chinese comprehensive scientific and technological work. Tiangong Kaiwu. From the name, Peng Kang's ambition can be seen. From the beginning, he did not expect Tiangong to be just a simple software for controlling technology. As the end of the third semester approaches, those who should prepare for the postgraduate entrance examination should also make preparations in advance. In previous years, many third and fourth year students began to contact schools or mentors at this time. But this time, Peng Kanga and his 4 companions seemed to have disappeared from this bustling campus, and they started living a secluded life. Apart from attending classes, several people didn't even go to the laboratory, let alone consult with their mentors and prepare for the postgraduate entrance examination. This made Lu Maosher, the teacher of several automation courses, feel very strange. He is very optimistic about these 4 students. Unlike ordinary students, these individuals are all excellent, and due to their affluent families, they are not eager to work, but can instead focus on studying with peace of mind. Watching other students either rush to find internship units or prepare for professional course review for the postgraduate entrance examination. These few people became silent instead, which made Lu Maosher anxious. After all, they were the students he had booked as his graduate supervisor. At that time, these people also kept saying that they would apply for his major. For these top students, the difficulty of taking the postgraduate entrance examination for their major in this school is indeed not high. And for those who come from the University of Science and Technology, if they apply across schools, they are also quite popular. That evening, several people who were busy in the dormitory did not notice that two unexpected guests had broken into room 413. Lu Maosher and Li Feng. Li Feng's goal is very simple. It is to come for Peng Kang. After all, compared to the strength of automation courses, Li Feng values Peng Kang's performance in big data and algorithms in previous years more. This time, he is also eager to see the situation. But when four people were busy in the dormitory, they didn't even notice the arrival of the two teachers. And at this moment, several people are enthusiastically discussing around a multi-rotor drone. Meng Hui sat directly on the ground with a laptop in his arms to debug. "What are you doing?" Lu Maosher asked curiously. Hearing the sound coming from behind, several people stood up one after another. "Teacher Lu, Teacher Li, why did you come?" Seeing the visitor, Peng Kang curiously asked. Li Feng glared at him and said, "How dare you say so, kid? You all need to prepare for the postgraduate entrance exam, how come you guys are silent?" Hua Pengyun awkwardly touched the back of his head and said, "Teacher, we're not planning to take the postgraduate entrance exam anymore. We want to start a business." Upon hearing these words, Lu Maosher immediately stopped and said, "Kid, you said you wanted to take my postgraduate entrance exam, but now you're saying you're giving up." Li Feng became even angrier and said, "Entrepreneurship. What are you doing when starting a business? Do you understand the project with just your basic scientific knowledge?" Meng Hui smiled and said, "Teacher, don't worry. Come and take a look at our flight control program. Also, could you please give us some guidance?" As he spoke, he handed over the notebook he was holding and placed it on the table. Lu Maosher and Li Fengwen still looked at it, but the displeasure on their faces still highlighted that they were angry at the moment. But as they watched for a longer time, their facial expressions became more serious. In the following 10 minutes, the dormitory was completely silent, with only two teachers occasionally whispering and the sound of mouse scrolling and keyboard tapping. 10 minutes later, Lu Maosher raised his head and looked at Meng Hui with fiery eyes. "Did you do this?" Meng Hui shook his head and said, "The technical framework was built by Kangzi, and the rest was written by us. Kangzi is working on another project." Upon hearing these words, Li Feng suddenly looked at Peng Kang and said, "What project are you working on?" Peng Kang smiled slightly upon hearing this and pointed to his computer on the table. Chapter 5. Do you know what you are doing? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Maosher and Li Fengwen ran directly to Peng Kang's computer desk and looked at the notebook. On the desktop, it is very simple, except for a Tiangong application icon, there are no other special applications. Is that this Tiangong? Lu Maosher pointed to the computer and looked at Peng Kang. Peng Kang nodded and walked over. "Teacher, I'll do it. I've applied encryption." After finishing speaking, click on the icon of Tiangong directly to open it. There was no expected corresponding application box popping up, but instead a progress bar appeared. Detecting computer environment. Computer environment is normal, please enter verification password. At the end of the progress bar, a simple input box pops up directly in the center of the screen. After Peng Kang skillfully entered the 12-digit password, an application box popped up. There is no other content except for a few simple operation modules. Upon seeing the content of the module, Lu Maosher and Li Feng were immediately stunned. Then he drove away Peng Kang and started clicking on each module to view it. After reviewing, start checking the back-end code directly. At first glance, it took over half an hour, but when they saw behind them, the two of them glanced at each other and shook their heads. Lu Maoshe stood up and looked at Peng Kang seriously. Do you know what you're doing? Peng Kang and the others looked at each other with a smile, then nodded and said, we know. Li Feng also asked, how is the current level of development completion? I have completed all the control modules on my end and have not yet started debugging with Meng Hui's flight control system. Peng Kang answered truthfully. Lu Maoshe nodded and said, don't cover it up, what level have you really achieved? At present, the cluster array control module has been completely completed. There is not much work done on intelligent control because there is no practical data available. So only basic search, patrol, obstacle avoidance, and abnormal prompt modules were developed. At the beginning of the combat module, the preparation was to design modular and rapid reloading based on 5.56 caliber weapons. Peng Kang touched his nose and answered. Stop, that's all for now. Don't do the combat module, wait for us to report. Lu Maoshe quickly stopped Peng Kang. If they could do this, it would be enough. If they continued, it would be a bit beyond their boundaries. Li Feng also asked, what difficulties do you still have now? Hua Pingyun smiled and said, the company program is already leaving, and I don't have any difficulties here. Xiang Jun's face looked a bit ugly. I have some problems here. This drone was handcrafted by ourselves, so the level of precision is definitely not as good as what the factory produces. But if we go to the factory for customization, we are afraid of drawing leaks, and without customization, we won't be able to increase production. To meet Kangxi's testing requirements, a minimum of 24 drones are required. At our rate of 1 drone per week, it will take 6 months to complete all of them. Lu Maoshe nodded and said, we know now. Let's wait for the news. Don't ask anyone else to customize it now. After speaking, he walked out of the dormitory with Li Feng in a lively manner. Let's continue. Meng Hui looked at her roommate and asked. Peng Kang nodded and said, continue, there is still an issue with your data transmission module and the delay is quite high. Let's continue. After speaking, a few people buried their heads and began to discuss. In the following days, no one came to disturb them again. On the other hand, Hua Pingyun received a call to obtain relevant materials belonging to their own company. At the same time, a registered capital of 5 million has also been paid in. Alright brothers, let's go from being a millionaire to becoming poor again. Holding the official seal and company-related qualifications in his hand, Hua Pingyun laughed excitedly. The final exam will be in a few days. After the exam, you can go outside. Now, the places suitable for setting up factories in Luzhou are all in Luoyang district, so we need to choose those places. Peng Kang realized that he would need to conduct a large number of experiments in the future, which would require a vast land and sparse population. But what about our production? Xiang Jun asked deeply into his soul at this moment. Let's wait for 2 months. Didn't Teacher Lu and Teacher Li say to report it? Let's wait for their news first. If not, let's use the 3D printing equipment and do it ourselves. After thinking for a moment, Peng Kang gritted his teeth and said. We can't afford the expensive one. The consumer-grade FDM 3D printer is already being tested, and we'll find a way to buy one then. You should know that now, compared to 2023, a 3D printer is still very expensive. So don't think about industrial-grade products at this stage, let's start with consumer-grade ones and work on them slowly. In the next few days, several students will switch from research and development mode to exam mode. However, for these top students, the difficulty of the final exam is obviously lower than the difficulty of developing their flight control system. The final exam had just ended that morning, and a few people returned to their dormitories to discuss the exam. Summer vacation is definitely not coming back, should we move directly to the company? Xiang Jun looked at Peng Kang and asked. Peng Kang didn't answer. Instead he looked at Hua Pengyun and said, "How is the company doing?" Hua Pengyun shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I've talked to an agent for a while, and the cheapest one is a toy factory that is about to close down. The 10-acre factory and a 5-story office building will be sold for nearly 4 million yuan. If we take over, we won't have the money to buy the equipment." Chapter 6. First Inspection, Seeking Flowers and Tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing these words, several people also fell silent. Good guy, whether the late emperor started his own business or the middle path collapsed. If they take over, they will have to consider bankruptcy when they start their own business. The factory you are looking at, Huapenjian, you can discuss and handle the procedures. Then go to the industrial and commercial department to change the registered address. Lu Maosher, who suddenly pushed the door in, spoke up. But behind him, besides Li Feng, there were also the department head and several old men. "Teacher Lu, you are here." Seeing the person coming, Peng Kang quickly stood up and said hello. "Your entrepreneurship school and local government will provide some policy compensation, so you don't have to worry about the money issue. We are here to see Tiangong this time." Department head Li Zhou spoke directly. Peng Kang nodded and directly opened the computer, opening the Tiangong software. However, this time only a few old men who followed came to inspect. "Teacher, don't you guys look?" Meng Hui asked in confusion as she saw her teachers not approaching but instead studying around the drone on the table. Department head Li Zhou shook his head and said, "We won't look anymore. This is the first project inspection conducted by the people from above." Although he spoke extremely politely, Peng Kang understood the implied meaning. They were not qualified to read. Tiangong is different from other software. If this software really achieves its design purpose, it is a military project that involves confidentiality principles and cannot be viewed. Although Amelia's famous Predator was officially put into combat in 1995, in reality, countries around the world are exploring new possibilities in the field of drones. As a brand new system, without falling too far behind, Huagua naturally attaches great importance to this project, which is an excellent opportunity for overtaking on bends. And after years of development, people have gradually realized that drones are not just in the form of predators. So developing multiple forms of drones and related tactics has become one of the key construction projects of the military in recent years. And the situation reported by the University of Science and Technology this time naturally impressed some research institutes and the military studying drones. The purpose of these people on this trip is to pursue Tiangong, and drones are just a companion. During this period, the security department focused on investigating the situation of Peng Kang and his family. After confirming that there were no issues, the project evaluation began. According to the report from the University of Science and Technology, the conclusion drawn by everyone is that if the Tiangong system is truly developed, it can actually be paired with any type of drone. And they also don't believe that the 4 undergraduate students can make groundbreaking drones at this stage. At least based on their academic background, it is difficult for a few people to handle aerodynamics. Although they reviewed Peng Kang's information during the pre-evaluation and believed that Tiangong might be better, seeing Tiangong's actual working hours exceeded several people's expectations. Many of the key parts of the code are completely incomprehensible to them. And obviously at this moment, they are discussing this part of the code. Upon hearing their discussion, Peng Kang smiled slightly in his heart and said, "The crystallization of Godwin's civilization. If you guys understand it, then they'll be fooling around. And the code they see is incomplete. It seems logical, but there are too many missing modules, so Peng Kang won't really release them." Until almost 3 p.m. in the afternoon, several people finished the discussion. "John, everyone, let's go eat first. It's really late, and the principal is still waiting for my news." Department head Li Zhou saw several people finish their work and quickly stepped forward to say. The leader Zhang did not reply, but looked at Peng Kang and said, Tiangong is very stunning. To be honest, there are many things we don't understand. How did you consider it? Peng Kang smiled slightly and said, our original intention was for national defense, but if you don't like it, we will castrate and turn to the market. Zhang shook his head and said, don't play around with me, kid. That's not what I'm talking about. If the military purchases, it must have core code and there can't be backdoors. At any time, safety is the top priority. Peng Kang firmly refused, it's impossible. The current Tiangong is just the simplest platform, and it hasn't been perfected yet. In my plan, it will be the core control platform and research and development platform for unmanned combat systems in the future. For the sake of confidentiality, we won't even apply for a patent for this system, let alone open it up. But if the military purchases, we will separate a control platform from Tiangong and hand it over to you, and the relevant source code will be delivered together to ensure no backdoors are left. Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, Mr. Zhang and others turned pale. They understand the practice of not applying for a patent. After all, many companies do not apply for patents for their products in order to maintain confidentiality, in order to prevent the leakage of core secrets. The most well-known example in this regard is the formula and unique processing technology of cola, which is not patented at all. Even today, 1% of the substances in cola cannot be detected. This 1% makes most other brands of cola less flavorful than the popular cola brands that have been popular for over 120 years. So the cola they sell all over the world is made from original cola, diluted with water by local companies, and the original cola slurry is only manufactured domestically in America. Because patents have time limits, once the time comes, there is really no need for confidentiality. Chapter 7. Solution, Seeking Flower Tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Of course, in order to reassure the military and ensure that our company can continue this research safely and securely in the future, I have another plan. As if he hadn't seen the faces of Mr. Zhang and others, Peng Kang said to himself. Upon hearing these words, Mr. Zhang's face brightened slightly and he said, let's talk about it. The 5 certificates for military industry are held by the military, Peng Kang said confidently in 8 words. Upon hearing Peng Kang's answer, Mr. Zhang and several teachers from the school looked at him in surprise. The military industry 5 certificates are 5 certificates issued by the military. Certification of Weapon and Equipment Quality Management System, abbreviated as National Military Standard Certification, Confidentiality Qualification Certification for Weapon and Equipment Research and Production Units, abbreviated as Confidentiality Certification, Weapon and Equipment Research and Production License, abbreviated as License Certification, Equipment Manufacturing Unit Qualification Directory Certification, abbreviated as Directory Certification, Record of Security and Confidentiality Conditions for Military Industry Confidential Business Consulting Services, abbreviated as Condition Record. Without these 5 certificates, if you want to produce weapons, you are seeking death. But to obtain these 5 certificates, the military needs to hold shares, which means that the possibility of private financing has been basically abandoned. This is a huge sacrifice for startup companies. After all, private financing and development are the fastest. At the same time, such military-owned enterprises are basically bidding farewell to Nasdaq. I can't decide on the military industry 5 certificates, it depends on the final performance of Tiangong. However, have you considered the military's shareholding? Upon hearing Peng Kang's answer, Zhang's attitude suddenly became friendly and amiable. In any case, there is no one who comes with peace of mind. This is the rhythm of becoming one's own. Peng Kang nodded with a bitter smile and said, do you think we dare to use this thing we are doing to raise funds in the market? And we never thought about going public from the beginning. This is the result of Peng Kang's discussion these days. Given the situation of their own project and the hearsay-level knowledge reserves of a few people about finance, they do not believe they have the confidence to control a listed company at all. They never considered finding a professional manager from the beginning. Those who work in their field are not at ease with handing over the company to professional managers to focus on research and development, as there will be more and more secrets in the future. Since that's the case, then the only option is not to go public and play on your own. Peng Kang nodded and said, "We have considered the possibility of offering 10% of the shares, as the three of them now hold 30%. Zhang nodded and said, "We understand your attitude. Please move to the new company as soon as possible and the project progress should be fast." After speaking, he walked out of the dormitory. Department head Li Zhou said directly, "The school will help you apply for entrepreneurial assistance." After leaving this sentence, they walked out of the dormitory together. Watching the visitors leave one after another, Meng Hui hesitated and said, "Kangzi, do you think this is right for us?" Peng Kang knows what he means. Immediately nodded confidently and said, "There are too many secrets to what we are doing, and there will be more in the future. But it's not without a solution." Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, everyone was energized. After all, it would be perfect to make money while balancing high technology. Peng Kang reached out and picked up the notebook on the table, starting to draw and draft the diagram. It's very simple. Our company, Xingchen Technology, is owned by the military. If we develop other projects in the future, such as the battery project we discussed earlier, we can establish a wholly owned subsidiary, Xingchen Energy. Then use Xingchen Energy to raise funds and go public. Even future star electrons and star chemistry can follow this path. But for the sake of confidentiality, we only do technical authorization for our subsidiaries. All research and development are placed in the laboratories under the headquarters umbrella. As they watched Peng Kang write and draw in his notebook, their glasses suddenly lit up. Hua Pengyun excitedly patted the table and said, "This move is fine. As long as we keep the factory's production confidential, everything else is fine and we can still make money." Meng Hui and Xiang Jun nodded in agreement. Seeing that they had never seen the world before, Peng Kang couldn't help but curl his lips. This trick had been played by various major groups in his past life. But for those who are still in school, this is indeed like a dark willow and a bright flower. "Okay, since that's the case, Huazi, you can go contact me now. We'll take the factory building. But one thing, keep those equipment for me." Regarding Peng Kang's instructions, Hua Pengyun had some doubts. "Kangzi, those are all toy production lines. Why do we need them?" "Renovation." Peng Kang replied positively. "Renovation?" a few people asked in surprise. Peng Kang nodded and said, "Yes, now all we need to do is transform it to produce drones, and we don't need to be too precise. When the money arrives, we will buy machine tools and related equipment, and when we come back, we will renovate them ourselves. Drones cannot be handed over to outsiders for production." Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, Hua Pengyun nodded and said, "Okay, I'll go out and talk." After finishing speaking, he grabbed 2 loaves of bread and a bottle of beverage from the table and walked out the door. And Peng Kang and others began to organize information. There are too many drawings and drafts in the dormitory during this period, some of which need to be saved, while others need to be flushed along the toilet. Chapter 8. Being Surrounded. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Throughout July, Peng Kang carried his computer and thoroughly penetrated the factory building, transforming the entire production line in Tiangong system. As the purchase of tools and materials continues to arrive, the money in the company's account visibly decreases. At the beginning of August, when the production line was completely renovated, there was still 2.2 million left in the company's account. Fortunately, the entrepreneurship assistance policy that the school helped apply for has come down, and due to the special nature of the project, the school has also sponsored some. Otherwise, their 5 million is really not enough. After all, the threshold for heavy asset entrepreneurship is much higher than that for light asset entrepreneurship. At this time, 24 drones have already been placed on the small square in front of the office building. "Kangzi, let's start." Hua Pengyun and the others looked at Peng Kang excitedly. Peng Kang nodded and immediately began the operation on Tiangong. And these 24 drones also began to take off one by one. With Peng Kang's operation, the 24 drones also began to dance gracefully in the air, constantly forming various simple patterns. Okay, the cluster array control module has been tested. Next, we will test the application module. After speaking, Peng Kang began to import the pre.set data into the database. Immediately, 24 drones began patrolling the entire factory building, and as the patrol began, targets marked in advance in the database were discovered one by one. The drone quickly surrounded. Warning! Warning! You have been exposed, put down your weapon, surrender immediately. Listening to the sound coming from the drone, Hua Pengyun and the others stared at Peng Kang in amazement. So what? I'm sorry, I forgot to change the prompt sound, hee. Peng Kang also smiled awkwardly. However, a few people did not pay attention to these details. They were all shocked by the automatic avoidance of roadblocks by drones during the patrol process. Kangzi, has our project been completed now? Xiang Jun asked excitedly. Peng Kang shook his head and said, there are a few more questions. Firstly, the communication module. In order to prevent hacker intrusion and anti-interference, I rewrote a set of data link transmission, which is much more advanced than the US military's link.16. But the problem is that it is definitely stronger than the one used by the military now. The problem is that this data link system is definitely different from the one used by the military now. Do you think the military will maintain two sets of data links? Just this one question made a few people feel a bit frustrated. Secondly, our drone's battery is not working yet and can support up to 3 hours of patrol missions. Therefore, the focus of the next phase is on the battery. Thirdly, currently our communication is not connected to satellites, which is necessary in the future, so there is no universal docking platform and data distribution platform yet. Fourthly, the current Tiangong is still too rudimentary. In order to maintain confidentiality, we cannot hire anyone and let them directly edit on Tiangong. This is seeking death. So we need our own editor. I have built the framework, but the functional modules need to be developed by people. Huazi, recruit people. Fifth, we need a server, but we are short of money. So contact the school and see if they have any good suggestions. Hua Pengyun nodded and said, okay, let's start with our seniors first. There are also problems with drone manufacturing and optimization is needed, so don't let related professionals go. Xiang Jun, who specializes in complex drone manufacturing, also added. After speaking, start contacting the department head Li Zhou to explain the situation. Upon receiving the news, Li Zhou immediately reported the relevant information to the principal. The next morning, 4 people carrying notebooks and steamed stuffed buns with soybean milk just walked slowly to the company park, and found many strangers patrolling around. A few people were all a bit inexplicable for a moment. But before they had any questions, Li Zhou and Principal Jiang Zicheng, who were waiting at the door, rushed over directly. You just came, and I can't get through on the phone. Li Zhou asked first. A few people felt awkward upon hearing this. I went back too late last night and fell asleep. I didn't notice that my phone ran out of battery. Meng Hui awkwardly explained. Alright, stop talking. The person who will be inspecting today will be here soon. Come and wait with us. After speaking, take a few people inside. Principal, what's going on with these people? Peng Kang pointed to the strangers patrolling around and asked. Jiang Zicheng glared at Peng Kang and said, how dare you say that? Didn't you receive a notification that you used a new data chain? Huapenjian has hyped up your data chain. The military couldn't help it anymore, so they sent someone to protect this place overnight. But you better pray that your data link is really as he said. Otherwise, not only will you be unlucky this time, but we will also be criticized along with you. Peng Kang nodded thoughtfully. It seemed that there were indeed significant issues with the military's data chain at present, so the military was anxious and refused to miss any opportunity. Don't worry, it's all here, absolutely no problem. After speaking, I took a picture of the computer in my bag behind me. Li Zhou also spoke up at the appropriate time and said, "We discussed the situation that Peng Yun mentioned yesterday on our way here. Recruitment is not a problem. Many of your senior students have graduated this year. If this inspection is successful, we will introduce them to you. The matter of money and servers needs to be discussed with the military. If this project is really excellent, then if the military invests, you won't be short of money. They will recommend or even customize servers for you. After all, this is not an ordinary project." Upon hearing these words, several people nodded excitedly. Chapter 9. Starry Technology for Amplifying Satellites, Seeking Freshness. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Not letting a few people wait too long, just after 9 o'clock, some black cars arrived at the park one after another. There are soldiers wearing military uniforms, and some who appear to be researchers. More than 10 people got off the car and walked over. Mr. Zhang walked over and said, "Peng, I have provided feedback on your request last time. We have brought the relevant personnel, and whether we can meet your needs depends on your project." Looking at Zhang's smiling expression, Peng Kang smiled confidently. "Ladies and gentlemen, will you first examine the cluster array control system or the Kunlun data link system?" Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, several researchers behind couldn't help but say, "Let's first take a look at the Kunlun data link system." Peng Kang nodded and said, "Okay, everyone, come with me to the conference room." After speaking, he led everyone to the conference room in the only office building in the park. However, only one general and a few researchers came in this time. Peng Kang skillfully mastered the projector and began introducing the Kunlun data link system. As the introduction deepened, the few people present went from being careless at the beginning to having serious faces and being stunned. After introducing the framework and encryption of the entire data link system, Peng Kang also introduced his own developed firewall system. After all, it's about money. This time, Peng Kang has taken out one of his few stocks. More than half an hour later, the conference room was completely silent. Peng Kang picked up his teacup and started drinking tea on his own with a smile, leaving the computer for several researchers to discuss on their own. After a while, one of the excited old men looked up at Peng Kang and said, "What kind of editing system do you use?" Upon hearing these words, the other few people suddenly realized that there was a possibility of leakage as long as they used foreign software for editing. This is unacceptable to those who already understand this Kunlun data link system. Peng Kang took over the computer and skillfully opened a software called 9-Chapter Editor on it. The 9 Chapters Editor is named after my ancient Chinese mathematical monograph, 9 Chapters on Arithmetic. I developed this editor myself. You are among the first outsiders to see it. The entire Kunlun data chain system is edited based on it, and I wrote the underlying code for Chapter 9 myself. I have complete independent intellectual property rights, so you can rest assured in this regard. In the future, we will continuously improve the 9 Chapters Editor. All software development in our company will be carried out on 9 chapters, so you don't have to worry about any leaks." Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, the general who came with him stared at him with fiery eyes, while the researchers snatched the computer and continued their research. After more than an hour, everyone walked out of the conference room. "Lao Li, how is the situation?" Another general who came with him looked at the general who entered the conference room and asked. General Li didn't say much, just nodded excitedly and said, "Star Technology has launched a large satellite and gained a huge amount. From the current perspective, it is indeed more advanced than Link.16. Moreover, it is still being developed using their self-developed software editor." Upon hearing these words, everyone around became excited. Although it is too detailed and unclear, based on this sentence, they understand what it means. Peng Kang smiled and said, "We're short of money, there's nothing we can do. If we don't bring out some real things, we won't be able to exchange for money." Peng Kang's words made them burst into laughter, but they all understood his meaning. They are not really short of money, it's just a lack of money for the company's development. Moreover, with their abilities, they can go to any big company or go abroad without earning money, but since they have put in a lot of effort to develop these things, it shows their childlike heart. Alright, you've satisfied Lao Li's desires. If you can't satisfy the desires of us, the money won't be too much. The other general who started the conversation smiled and said. The success of General Li and his team's verification just now undoubtedly boosted their confidence. After all, the data chain models have been developed, and in their view, a control system is not a problem at all. Upon arriving at the park, Peng Kang looked at the speaking general and said, "May I know your surname?" The general smiled and said, "My surname is Chen." Peng Kang nodded and said, "I need your cooperation. The people patrolling around should be your people, right?" General Chen nodded. "I need to take photos of them, input their photos into the target database, and then you can let them freely play and run wherever they like. In factories, office buildings, and industrial parks, you can run around freely. I can use drones to control and chase them. Do you think it's okay? Of course, after testing, I will clear the database. Don't worry, you can operate it in front of me." The general nodded and then waved to call in more than 10 people. After Peng Kang quickly took photos and imported them into the database, these people scattered in the park. Peng Kang began to operate proficiently, demonstrating the cluster array control system, controlling the drone to eliminate various digital shapes in the air. Even under the command of soldiers and researchers on the side, they dispersed their formations and flew to various places. We need this technique in Chapter 10, Asking for Flowers and. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After the demonstration of the cluster array control system was completed, the soldiers and researchers behind had already set their sights on it. They all saw the value of this control system. For troops who are just beginning to explore unmanned combat systems, this control system and control method have brought them too much shock. If you don't have anything else you want to see, then I'll move on to the intelligent search module, which is also the core function of this system. General Chen nodded. Then Peng Kang activated the intelligent search module in Tiangong. For convenience, Peng Kang retrieved the camera display area of 24 drones. As Peng Kang's operation was completed, the 24 drones that were originally hovering in the air arranged as numbers 0 automatically dispersed into 8 teams and began flying in 8 directions. Peng Kang, on the other hand, left the computer directly without any further operations. You're not doing it anymore. Seeing Peng Kang watching the play on the side, General Chen asked. Peng Kang nodded with a smile and said, "My entire system is called Intelligent Cluster Array Control Technology. Artificial Intelligence." General Chen raised his eyebrows and asked. Peng Kang smiled and didn't speak, instead pointing to a drone shuttling between trees and buildings in the distance and automatically evading it. The person who came to investigate was completely excited when they saw the answer that was almost like a default. An old man behind him stepped forward and grabbed Peng Kang, saying, "I heard that Wairu is also researching artificial intelligence. What's the difference between yours and him?" AlphaGo. At this stage, it's just an algorithm. Peng Kang felt a slight disdain in his heart. Obviously, having accepted the legacy of the Godwin star civilization, he has enough confidence in this regard. After all, the Godwin civilization belongs to mechanical civilization, and the core of mechanical civilization is artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence you mentioned about Ware-1 is just an algorithm based on artificial neural networks for reinforcement learning, and can only be considered the most basic application of artificial intelligence. Peng Kang smiled and explained. "What about yours?" the old man continued. Peng Kang pointed to the drone in the distance and said, "Keep looking. Warning. Warning. You have been exposed, please stop taking action immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 drones not far away had already surrounded one of them, while warning sounds came from inside the drones. At the same time, on Peng Kang's computer, the corresponding monitoring screen immediately sent a prompt. 007, 008, 009 have detected intruders. Should we take further action? Peng Kang quickly stepped forward and cancelled taking the next step. Upon hearing the prompt sound from the computer, General Chen quickly approached and asked, "What does the next move refer to?" Peng Kang fell silent for a moment and said, "The weapon system has not been installed yet because we don't have guns or bullets. However, the weapon module has already been preliminarily developed." Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, all the military researchers who were surrounding fell silent and looked at him with strange eyes. However, then a dense sound of prompts came from the computer, indicating that all the dozen or so people sent out just now had been found. "Do we need them to come back?" General Chen asked. Peng Kang shook his head and said, "I just turned off all the weapon modules. You can let them run away, just run away." General Chen nodded and pointed to 4 of the people, saying, "You can run around this park casually. According to your usual training, the purpose is to avoid drones. You can use all possible means to attack drones." Peng Kang suddenly looked up and said. General Chen grinned and said, "Do you hear me? Show me some real skills and don't let these little guys underestimate me." Upon hearing Peng Kang's words, the 4 designated individuals nodded with a smile and then dispersed and ran away. Suddenly, the drone that had surrounded several people also caught up with them as they ran. Whether in a factory building, under the shade of trees, or in an office building, drones are able to avoid obstacles normally. Until now, those who had not paid much attention to these drones finally understood the power of this drone. Suddenly, a drone was smashed and dropped by one of the people using a cup. Before the people behind could feel sorry, a prompt sound came from the computer. "Detected that number 013 has lost power. Should we proceed with harmless treatment?" Immediately, Peng Kang quickly cancelled it again. "What is harmless treatment?" General Chen asked. Peng Kang rubbed his nose and said, We couldn't get the explosives, so we didn't load them either." Upon hearing these words, everyone behind them couldn't hold their breath. "What else are you hiding?" General Chen pondered and said, "Are you trying to prevent the secret from being leaked?" Peng Kang nodded and said, "Although the production was very rough, this drone also contains too many secrets to fall into the hands of the enemy." "Not rough, not rough. There's no problem with the test. Hurry up and bring back that drone. This is a treasure, it can't be damaged." Seeing the excited look of an old man behind him, Peng Kang felt a bit heartbroken. After all, the older generation of researchers in the Republic were once too difficult, and every funding was used with caution. The test was over, and the damaged drones were brought back. The remaining 23 drones flew back to the front of the field on their own and landed neatly on the ground. Peng Kang and others immediately went to test the drone, while the military personnel whispered in the distance. After a while, someone from the military walked over. "How's it going?" Peng Kang and others proudly asked as they looked at the drone in front of them. "We need this technology," General Chen said. Upon hearing these words, Hua Pengyun became excited. He was currently in charge of the company's finances and was most anxious as he watched the money in the company's account gradually decrease. "Which one do you want?" "All, including that drone." General Li pointed to the drone on the ground and said.